which is a very interesting session entitled Millennials, India, Managing Transfer of Power to the Young. Meanwhile, once again, going back on screens, you can see the poll question for this session. We invite you all to please participate and share your opinion. And on your way out, please do not forget to put back your tags and the copy of the agendas so that we can recycle and reuse them. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, may I request you all to please come back to your seats. We are ready to start the next session. I request all of you to please kindly join us back. Ladies and gentlemen, we have already shared the poll question. Please do participate, and meanwhile, please join me in welcoming on stage Ms. Syna Dehnugara, Features Editor, CNBC TV 18, Mr. Vineet Agarwal, Managing Director, Transport Corporation of India Limited, Ms. Bindu Subramaniam, singer, songwriter, educator, and co-founder SaPa in Schools, Mr. Vedant Kanoi, co-founder and CEO Foodcloud, and Mr. Anubhav Nath, Director, Ojas Art. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming them with a huge round of applause.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for sitting back for this session. Before we jump in, I'm going to actually, that's what we were discussing as well. Let's keep this session as interactive as possible. So we are not going to bunch up the Q&A for the end. We are actually going to try and involve you at all steps as we go along. In fact, when we are talking, if there is a point that any of you want to make that is relevant to that immediate conversation, please just put your hands up and let's make it participative so that we can all be richer for it. I'm just going to set a short context for our conversation today, and then we'll take it forward in a Q&A format with the panel. So the topic is Millennials, India, Managing Transfer of Power to the Young. So now India is getting younger, and the millennials, which are essentially people born between 1980 and 2000, are set to play a more dominant role in the nation's affairs over the next decade. In fact, India is predicted to be one of the youngest countries in the world by 2022, where the average age of the Indian will be 29 years. That's younger than what I am today. India's digital economy is led by young entrepreneurs. Correct? Vineet Agarwal of Oyo is 25 years old. Bhavish Agarwal of Ola is born in 1985. He's 33 years old. And Sachin and Binny Bansal, who exited Flipkart to Walmart in a $16 billion deals, they are both dollar billionaires today, are about 35 or 36 years. Again, millennials. Correct? So now being millennials themselves, they get the core, I think, of what differentiates their generation from the one before it. They get that work is not just a job. Correct? It is about a continuous stream of consciousness where your life is not divorced from what you do 12 hours in a day. And if you look at the missions that some of these companies have set out, they're indicative of that, what they're trying to achieve, not with their own businesses, but the way they're trying to attract talent to their businesses as well. So I'm going to pick up one example. For instance, Bhavish's vision for Ola is, not to build the most profitable company in the world or to build the largest ride-sharing business. It's actually to build mobility for 1 billion Indians. Correct? Now, in setting that larger cause for Ola, and within that, the promises of making intra-city travel easier, creating opportunities for their driver community, and spelling that out very clearly, what they're doing is not only getting millennials in the workforce to feel engaged with what they do day to day in terms of their work, but also create an atmosphere where they can thrive. Another legendary example is, of course, the Flipkart town halls, the leadership summits that were built internally for the 1,000-odd employees, 10,000-odd employees at Flipkart that the founders of those companies regularly addressed. Leadership summits for intrapreneurs, correct? You're no longer calling them, the next CXOs. You want them to think entrepreneurially, and you call them as much. You give them titles that are indicative of that. Now, that is one part of it. The other part of it is that young Indians will, of course, dominate every domain, and this will not be restricted just to business or the arts. It will be politics too. And we need to look no further than an interesting example from New Zealand. Their Prime Minister, in the way she's brought her whole self to work, whether it's bringing her breastfeeding baby to the United Nations General Assembly, or whether it was the way in which she displayed compassion and empathy in the last couple of weeks in the aftermath of the terror attack. She's a millennial. She was born on 26 July 1980. Right? So these are the kind of people that are setting context and setting sort of examples for young people today that we can look up to. So as we go into the panel, these are some of the questions that we'll try to address. As millennials take leadership positions in business, politics, and arts, what will the world look like? But more importantly, how will we prepare for the changeover? How willing is older leadership to ceding power to the young, and what will be the dynamic of that changeover, and how can young India actually prepare to lead? What do we as millennials need to take from the past and refer or infer from the future to actually become good leaders? So we'll discuss all of this and a lot more. I'm just going to quickly introduce the panel before I hop over on that side. Vineet Agarwal, Managing Director, Transport Corporation of India, one of India's largest logistics companies. He's also currently serving as the Vice President of ASSOCHAM. Then we have Bindu Subramaniam, who is a singer, songwriter, educator, and co-founder of the Subramaniam Academy for Performing Arts, an institute that trains musically inclined children to become professional performers. Vedant Kanoi, co-founder and CEO of Foodcloud, the entrepreneur on the panel, and I hope that all of us are in our own way too. Foodcloud is a marketplace for home food connecting 350 verified home chefs in Delhi and Calcutta with customers. Before he became an entrepreneur, he worked at UBS in New York. And last but not the least, Anubhav Nath, director at Ojas Art. Ojas Art focuses on the holistic promotion of contemporary Indian arts, traditional as well as tribal. And Anubhav is also a trustee of the Salam Balak Trust, working to provide support services for street and working children. All right, a round of applause for them, please, as I walk over. All right, so in the context setting, I think one of the things that I push towards putting out is the hopes and aspirations of what millennials want to do with their lives, how they define what their goals are, and how they see themselves in a sort of complete holistic way. So I'm going to try and start with the younger people on the panel. I don't know who is the youngest, but let's start. Yeah, Bindu perhaps. Yeah, so let's start with you, Bindu. Give us a sense of your own personal journey, how, and these are not things that I think we obviously think of or, pen down and say, okay, these 5 things will make me a more complete person. But what's been your own journey in identifying that and then expressing it?
Firstly, thank you for the introduction. I think, firstly, to generalize a little bit, I think millennials as a generation are looking to go out and save the world. We all sort of want to feel that whatever we wake up and do every day is contributing to a larger cause, which is much more than just a job, which could be why we keep jumping from thing to thing. Personally, I come from a background where I come from a family of musicians. By qualification, though, I'm a lawyer. And then I decided that I really didn't want to be a lawyer. So I've been a performer for many years now. If I tell you how many, it'll kind of indicate how old I am, which is something I don't want to get into. And from being a musician, I realized that I had a passion for working with children. So we got seriously into music education, and then we started seeing the benefits of music education beyond creating the next generation of performers, which is important, but also how music and inter and transdisciplinary studies can create real benefits for all children. So how we can create 21st century citizens by giving them access to high quality music education, because it helps them with linguistic ability, it helps them with team building skills, it helps them with confidence, and how do you learn about music and math and music and physics, and how does that over a period of time ultimately make you more employable, whatever it is that you may choose to do.
All right. So you were starting early, and you're kind of, since you started and you've been doing this for about 7 to 8 years now, SaPa in schools, which is your program dedicated towards music education in schools, how have you seen just the way education is approached changing or evolving, given the context in which we are today, where literally, kids come out of the womb and, within a few months, they have some sort of device in front of them, exposing them to a world which is much, much wider than traditionally imagined.
I think generations are changing much faster now than they used to. When we were kids, probably the biggest complaints that we had were that our handwriting wasn't good or that we were talking too much in class. But now when you see kids who are in grade 2 or 3 who are about 10 years old, they're the kids who are the iPad generation. So from the time they've been born, they've been having access to digital tablets, and so their entire lives are centered around that. And as we're trying to adapt the education system to deal with the impatience of these kids, we realize that the kids who are now 2 and 3 are a different generation already, because they're the voice-first generation. They're no longer the kids who come out of the womb and play with the iPads. They're the kids who come out of the womb and start telling Alexa what they want. So I think our education system needs to adapt a lot more to be receiving of the experiences that kids have, rather than saying, okay, children don't have an attention span anymore. Because I don't think we can change the circumstances that surround them, but we can change the way that we educate them to be more receptive, more responsible, better citizens.
Vineet, you want to make a point here in terms of your own experience of seeing these generations change, right? So the millennials are 1980 to 2000. And you know, what Bindu is saying essentially is that we have to even kind of crunch down this definition of these generations. It's going to be 7 or maybe 8 years. And when you look at that, when you reflect on building a business, you're bringing in, you know, maybe 100 odd new employees, more than that, into your organization, into the management side perhaps. What has been your own experience on how that young person who's joining the workforce is changing and evolving? And is our education failing him? Just taking that point that Bindu was making forward.
Yeah, so just a disclaimer that I'm not a millennial. I'm much older than that, before that. And so we do hire close to 100 MBAs a year and about 500 plus at the graduate level every year. And when I speak to them, clearly the thought process when I used to interact with the same number of people maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago has absolutely changed. So then it was stability of jobs, it was how do I keep growing in the organization and so on. Versus now they're asking what is the purpose of your organization? What are you guys believing in? What do you believe in? How are you going to make a difference? And you know, one of the things that I always tell them is that as a logistics company, we are in the process of building our nation. So that is our goal, that is our purpose, absolutely. And on the second question, yes, the education has failed us. Clearly, when these people are coming in, and be it any category, any level, be it at the bachelor's level or at the MBA level, the skill sets that they require today, they just don't have them. So we have to literally, we have academies all over the country where we are training and retraining people on how they can be more adept to today's situations. And of course, simultaneously, we have to train, the management has to train themselves to accept them, which is also a tougher part, because when you train someone and that guy leaves in 2 years, the management feels that, oh, you know, what am I doing wrong? So it's a dichotomy here is that you are training them, but then they're not going to stay.
All right. So how do you deal with that as a leader, Vineet? And what are some of the changes perhaps you've brought in at TCI, apart from, of course, the positioning and spelling out the vision and spelling out your mission in a more empathetic manner so that you can connect with a younger audience? What are some of the changes that you've had to make within the organization to make it more young person friendly? Right? And it's not just, you know, a fancy office with red color walls and a foosball table. You know, it's not that. It's not as cosmetic as that, clearly.
We don't have any foosball tables in the office. But certainly the changes have to start coming in from a perspective of that, you know, first was the acceptance part. You know, the changes that what does the management feel, how are we going to deal with them? So the first acceptance was do not hire for the long term, hire for the short term. So in the group we have 7,000 employees that are on the payroll, but 20,000 people who are outsourced. So that number of outsourced people have increased, and what we just discussed, the gig economy, how people are more interested on the short term, the millennials are more interested in short term careers. So one is that. The second is moving them across various portfolios of work.
Okay.
So to keep their interest alive. Our industry is very dynamic because you need to be at the forefront of things, and it's 24/7.
Right.
So the challenges are high, and we'll talk about, you know, what are the things that millennials need to do, but simultaneously it is to keep their interest higher and alive.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm just going to buffer that with something I picked up, and I was actually very astonished. I'll just come to you, sir. Very astonished by that. So a study carried out by an executive search firm found that only 12% of the respondents had spent more than 10 years in their current company, and a majority of them had not spent more than 2 years in their current jobs, you know, which kind of resonates with exactly what you're saying is happening at TCI. Yes, sir, you had a question. Can we get a mic across to him so that he can pitch in?
Can I speak without the mic? Yes.
Yes, audible to us.
Thank you very much, and I'm taking the suggestion that we could participate anytime.
Yes.
First of all, I'll disagree with Vineet when he says he is not a millennial, because I've attended his wedding in this hall and he still looks the same. My question is in two parts, quickly. Why are we importing the American terms into India? Baby boomers, millennials, generation Y, Z. Can't we have our own Indian terms? Question number two. There is a song in Punjabi. Dil rehna chahiye jawan umran ch ki rakhya. The heart should remain young. What is there in the age? I have addressed over 500,000 youngsters across India in smaller cities. And let me assure you, a majority of them are much older than what we can think of. My friend Sumit sitting here still considers himself to be 18 and I am a perpetual 25. Now we are talking about millennial. Your comments, please.
All right. Vedant, you want to take a chance at that?
No, I completely agree with you on the age being what you think your age is. From a startup community, I'm considered old, right? And I'm a millennial by definition. But in the startup community, I'm considered old. And they say that KFC was started by somebody who was 62, if I'm not wrong, Colonel, when he first started his company. So you're absolutely right when it comes to age is just a number, and it's about how you feel. In terms of the terms bit, I don't know why that happens. That I think it's just that they are quick to give terms and names to things, where they have people doing loads of research. And once they give a name, it goes throughout popular media and sort of everyone adopts it. Having said that, you're absolutely right in saying that India is not the same as USA, but it's probably never been closer. So today, world over, you are seeing some common traits between young people. Because the message and the news and the information flows so quickly at the same time across the world, that there is some common factor and definitely common aspirations. You might be in a remote part of Rajasthan or you might be in New York City. They might be seeing, viewing and consuming the same information.
And therefore having the same aspirations.
Absolutely.
All right. Anubhav, you want to make a point here?
Also, with the new technologies and the internet, the bridges have been made so fast that at times it's difficult to even keep pace with it. You know, so for example, at Salam Balak Trust, we look after runaway and street children, and these children are coming from the interiors of the country, but they are in tune with everything that's happening, and they are completely global. So I think the new word, which really defines a lot of Indians, is glocal, which is a combination of global and local, because that's what we are. Like, we are local with a very global point of view.
So to that, I can say that the new mantra is think globally and act locally. So that is becoming a new age mantra.
Yeah.
From an entrepreneurship and age perspective, I'd like to say that we at Foodcloud are empowering women to work from home. And over 30% of women entrepreneurs, first-time women entrepreneurs, are above the age of 55 on our platform.
All right, but they are savvy on the platform.
Yeah,
how much hand-holding do you need to do?
Not much. Probably lesser than some of the millennials. Because millennials expect better customer service.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about your business a little bit, Vedant. It's interesting what you're doing, right? I mean, you can call them home chefs, and that's an interesting terminology to use. You know, you're giving the work that they do more dignity, you're giving it a better name, you're making it a little more aspirational than, you know, what it is imagined to be. Can you tell us a little bit about the gig workers in your business, right? So if I can call the home chefs also doing this as a gig, because, you know, they're doing this part-time when they're not doing their actual work, perhaps, which is taking care of the home and their children and the larger family. So doing this home chef, cooking the food and having it delivered is their gig, right? And on the other side, you have perhaps contractual workers, delivery boys and girls, also gig workers, correct? How do you deal with all of this gig happening? How do you manage it? Because as Vineet alludes to, it's difficult managing this young task force.
So, first of all, to talk about these gig workers, right? one reason why is this gig economy thriving is people want flexibility. And somewhere the corporate establishment is failing people who want to work. So just to give you a stat, there was a from 42% to 27% drop in women work participation in urban areas in India. And this is from 2007 to 2015, which is very, very recently. And why is this happening? Because the corporate world isn't aligned to be able to hire or absorb this talent pool. And that's why there is so much of gig economy, which is thriving, which gives them flexibility. So that is the first part, you know. Secondly, what is making this whole gig economy work is technology. So unless and until you have a very strong technology backbone, this will not work. And managing it will be very difficult. What has really helped is smartphones and internet connection being so cheap and freely available to anybody in India. So that has really enabled this whole gig economy, be it our home chefs who are mostly women working from home of all ages, going literally, I think our youngest chef is probably close to 18 and our oldest chef is 91 years old.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So she's a Gujarati lady, makes great food, and this is her first job, first gig, so to say.
Yeah. All right, interesting. Vineet, you want to just come in here on management of this remote workforce, right? How do you keep them engaged in the larger vision? How do you keep them aligned to larger management goals that need to be achieved, especially when perhaps they feel they're going to be in and out of this in 2 years, right? How do you inculcate that? Or as a business, have you started re-engineering even those concepts of, you know, employee loyalty and all of that? And how do you build leadership within the organization?
Yeah. So again, social for them, or ensuring that there is a social connect to everything that's happening is very critical. So the social connect happens with internally how are we engaging with each one of them. We have, for example, all the work that they need to do to manage the internal work with the company is all on mobile. So we have apps that they can put in the leave requests, they can put in their sales calls, they can do everything on their app, on the company app. So that frees them from being stuck to a particular desk, to a desktop. That gives them flexibility, what Vedant just talked about, as well as a certain level of comfort that, yes, you know, we can work from anywhere. The second aspect is build other platforms around what are beyond the nation building. Okay, TK, you know, as a nation building is a very large concept, what else? Now, so we just started something called TCI Safe Safar, which means that we are now going to major locations and talking to truck drivers about safety. Now that itself, we are seeing a lot of enthusiasm where they themselves are retweeting the employees in the company and talking about this specific thing, and they are talking to their family members as to how safety is important. So take it to the next level with them. Don't just leave it at them. The third thing we did was a survey to ask them what's happening, what do you feel? And we again took the survey to their parents. We just didn't leave it at them. We took it to the parents, to their spouses, to their brothers and sisters, and asked them, what do you feel your son, your husband working in this organization? And we got some very interesting feedback. So keep that engagement alive by pushing different things on a constant basis.
All right. That's as far as dealing with a larger workforce. But just one follow-up to that, Vineet, was building leadership. Correct? We spoke of this earlier, which is, you know, people don't want to do jobs for more than 5-6 years. And when you're looking to build out your leadership pipeline, correct? How do you deal with that? How do you deal with it now? I mean, might not be a challenge, but 10 years from now, how do you see that as a challenge, building out that pipeline?
See, anything related to human beings as well as people is always going to be challenging. And we have a high potential leadership development program in the organization where after the first 5 years, we start identifying them and put them through a leadership grind, including simple things like telling them, giving them a subscription to a business magazine. Because they don't read it, they don't have time to do that. So whether it's an online subscription, whether it's a physical subscription, but getting them to take that so that they start thinking about leadership, that they need to be aligned to this. And we've seen a decent amount of success in the last few decades to build that leadership pipeline. So this is just one example, but there is a clear-cut focus on building that pipeline. It is not that something that will happen automatically.
Yeah, it won't happen automatically. Vedant, you had a point. Anubhav, you want to make a point? Yeah.
Yeah, this is something that would not happen automatically, and this is where I think the role of mentorship is very important, and developing a certain professionalism, a level of professionalism with the younger workforce, which at times I think people find missing, or in my experience I have. And that is also something that will help in the transfer of the power / the new leaders emerging and coming forward, where they're easily able to take into these roles. The changes are going to happen nonetheless, because by 2030, it's approximated that 60% of our population will be under 30.
Yeah.
So you like it or you don't like it, but those changes will happen. The market, because of demand and supply, will cater to these younger individuals, and all those things are bound to happen. So we just need to, all of us need to be ready to accept that change and to recognize it and to prepare ourselves and the coming leaders for those roles.
Yeah. You give some, you take some, Vedant. In running your own startup now, you know, you're motivated, perhaps the first 5 employees that joined you, part of your co-founding team, equally charged up, motivated. How do you build out the next set of people? Right? And you need people to be like hands-on and completely on always, at least in a startup.
So we value commitment over anything else in our organization. So we value commitment over skill, knowledge, education. Beyond all measures, commitment is most important to us. We also try and inculcate pride. What Vineet was saying about how can you be motivated for a larger purpose? So we believe in creating well-being for women and their families via homemade food. So this motto, this can motivate you beyond the salary you're going to receive or you know, anything of that sort. Apart from that,
the missed salary cycle sometimes.
Salary cycle sometimes, absolutely, absolutely. Also, you know, things like ESOPs and having ownership and responsibility takes you a long way. So often when we are hiring people, even at lower levels, we give them the motivation that, listen, we won't hire anybody above you. You will be the manager if you prove yourself in 6 months. So those kind of things that we can use in a small, nimble, flexible organization like ours is a possibility. So those are the tools that are available to us. We might not be able to give health insurance to each and every employee, but yes, we can show them a dream and we can make it real and true for them in the future.
Bindu, you had a point to make.
Very much sort of echoing what Vedant is saying. It's a similar experience that we've gone through as well, where you have people who are sort of looking at the bigger dream. And for us, what it comes down to is having empowered music educators in the classroom, just like you have these home chefs. And what we found is, in our generations, there is a lot of jumping from career to career to career. Most of our music educators are actually engineers who have sort of one day decided that they don't want to get on the corporate bus anymore. But then how do you keep them motivated in being music educators? And so that sort of involves creating legitimacy and power in that role. So is it why are you a home chef? Why are you a music teacher? Couldn't you be an engineer? That's what you're trained to do. Is this a more powerful thing? So it's all about creating legitimacy for that role so that they feel empowered in the job that they're doing. So for us, we have so many engineers who take pride in the fact that they are educators, that they're music educators, which is much more value in their own minds than what some people perceive as, you know, you're just you can't do it, so you're teaching. So one is creating a value for the role that they're doing, and the other thing, as you're saying, is creating that sense of shared vision, because everybody who signs up to be a music educator as part of our community has the power to influence thousands of lives, thousands of children, and to develop that shared vision that we have of how we're going to change things going forward.
All right. Anubhav, you have a point to make.
Yeah. So, you know, also right now, I think we are entering this new age where, let's say, we started with the green revolution, then it was the industrial revolution, and now it's the time clearly for the creative revolution. We're seeing so many more people stepping out and wanting to be a part of the creative fields, whereas people realize that it's not an easy task, it's an uphill road. You know, you need years of dedication, but still they want to be a part of this creative journey, because the kind of individuality that creativity gives you and the individual recognition that you get is probably not possible in other work areas. So, and this is something, again, this is going to be across the board, where it is the time of the creative revolution, and more and more people are joining it. And with the advent of technology, which has been kind of disruptive in a lot of ways, it is just giving us like all these really new creative solutions. To me, even what Vedant's Foodcloud is a really creative solution to something. Again, also what Bindu is doing, you know, like coming from a classical music background, then to be doing the whole SaPa Academy and music classes, that's got a lot of creativity and technology invested in it.
Right. I think it's also a function of letting young people know that they need to bring their full selves, not just to work, but to life. I mean, there's no, I think that compartmentalization of, you know, this is what I'm going to do 10 to 12 hours in a day, this is what I'm going to do for the remaining 8 hours, is just not working with people, right? And I think a good example of that, one that comes to mind immediately, and we can discuss others that comes to yours, is the Google 35-hour project, right? Where they said that everyone, while you're at work, pick an area that you want to work on. And that's how the Google Arts project took off, you know, and a lot of other interesting projects that either have social impact or on the creative domains actually became entire revenue streams for Google, correct? Whether it's the work that they're doing with museums across the world in terms of creating interactive AR, VR enabled immersions at museums, now a paid revenue line, but just started as some engineer's passion project at work, you know. So the question really is, starting at that education level, legitimizing that, hey, you know, you might want to be a scientist, but you might also want to be a musician, and that's okay. You don't have to leave one for the other thing. You know, that choice that kids had to make at, you know, 15 or 16 when they are ticking off which stream they want to select, and then feeling like, you know, I don't even get this, but I'm making a decision for the rest of my life.
There's a joke that we tell sometimes where kids get into kindergarten and then they come out at the other end with an engineering degree and then say, what do I want to do with my life?
Yeah.
So it is that where we have to figure out what drives us. And we have examples in our own organization where we've had people who've left different careers and come and said, okay, now I feel like I have a reason to wake up in the morning. And I think, in a sense, that's what millennials are chasing, this reason to get up in the morning. And as you said, not divide between, okay, this is when I work and this is when I play.
Vedant?
So, you know,
how do corporations need to rethink, right?
So, multidisciplinary is something that's become extremely important, you know, that most people are multifaceted. And there has to be a way of being able to harness this multidisciplinary, you know, talent pool that we have in front of us. So that is something that we have to be able to do it for our own organizations. Like you gave a brilliant example of Google, and it's stated in many different areas where people did something else out of their comfort zone, which became really big and successful and satisfying as well. So similarly, at least for us, what we try and do is we involve different people from different streams in our business to do somebody else's work. You know, live a day in somebody else's shoes. It also helps us create backups for ourselves. but in a small organization like ours, but it also gives people insight into how difficult the other person's job might be or how other person's role might be, and they can maybe add value in their day-to-day life.
All right. Vineet, you want to add on to this in terms of, you know, how corporations need to rethink? And I know you cited some examples of what you're already doing at TCI, but you want to give us a sense of, in your own personal experience and your own life, if you could redo something, you know, re-trigger something for yourself, what would it be?
I think perhaps maybe spend more time on learning whatever your pursuits are. Because you know, I probably come from another generation where essentially work is 24/7, and it would mean traveling 10 days, 15 days in a month, and living out of a suitcase essentially. So you miss out on certain learning opportunities at that time and pursuing personal passion and personal interests. But then if you are able to build it along with it, like I built a passion around running, for example. So yeah, and when you're traveling to different cities, you just go and run there. That's on a personal level. But at organization level, I think it's a little difficult because the work is such that you have to remain focused. You're operating from so many different locations. Customer expectations have changed. Customers do not want to wait for any kind of response. They want it instantly. So I got my first Twitter complaint 3 years ago. And I was like, what happened? Where is this coming from? So there was a complaint on Twitter. And so like this, these things have started changing more rapidly. And I think getting the workforce to be aligned to that is also a huge challenge. And that's where we sometimes feel, and I'm coming to the little bit of the things that millennials need to do, is that we feel that they sometimes shy away from those responsibilities. When you're faced with a customer who's shouting and screaming, we sometimes feel that the newer generation cowers down a little bit.
Okay. All right. Cows down a little bit, Vedant? Yeah.
You know, for that, I would like to add that absolutely, I don't want to be facing a shouting customer either. It's not a comfortable space or position to be in. And when we expect a person who's probably had 2 years of experience to be able to handle this beautifully, I'm sorry. As management, we have the wrong expectation. The only way I was able to do it, and it's possible in a small organization like ours, is lead by example. So I tell them, you tell me the most difficult call you need to make this week, and I will make it for you. You sit in front of me and you see and hear me what I say and what I do. Also, we have to understand customer is always right. Always right. And unfortunately or fortunately, in today's day and age, they also have the power of social media, which can be misused and used. We have to have a little bit of a thick skin to be able to deal with the new age customer.
This is counterintuitive, right? So, I mean, the millennial is more open-minded, more adjusting, more empathetic, but not so as a customer.
They also want instant gratification, right? so
it's a double-edged sword.
So yeah. You're absolutely right in the sense that they are more adjusting and they are more open-minded, but they also have everything on their fingertips. Literally from your phone, you can do every basic need of yours without moving. And I'm sure you would like to add about the Lego playing and the coloring. So Bindu and us, we were discussing earlier, and she was mentioning that this is the first generation which has actually started playing in their free time with Lego and painting and gaming, etc.
Bindu, you want to complete that point, and we'll come to questions. Yes.
I was just saying that we are the first generation where it is appropriate for adults to be playing with Lego. We color, we call it mindfulness. We paint, so in our parents' generation, I think the only sort of hobbies that they were allowed to have would be like stamp collection or coin collecting. But here we have adults who are gaming. We have adults who have serious responsibilities but then play like children all the time. And all of the movies of our childhood have been remade, whether it's Jurassic Park or Jungle Book, for us as adults. So I think the market is also responding to the fact that we are grown-ups, but we haven't yet grown up.
Yeah, or don't want to either.
And to that, I would like to add that the younger generation is also looking at more experiences. Experiential spending is going up, like travel being one of the one area. And when we're talking about travel, it's like all kinds of travel: adventure travel, luxury travel, all different kinds of travel. As someone running an art initiative, I get requests for people wanting to commission artworks. They just don't want to buy an artwork. They want to be a part of the process, which at times worries me some, because artists are a different kind of people to deal with, and they're like there may be unmet expectations, but they want to be a part of the process. They want work in progress pictures, that what is the painting looking like. They may have some input. So it's about everything we do with them, especially from a luxury point of view, I think, is about like selling an experience to them. It's not just them wanting something. It has to be an experience.
And the seeking continues, right? It doesn't stop anywhere. It starts very early as well. You don't have to wait till you're 60 to start seeking. Yes,
okay.
Sir, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so very much. I am Dr. Dheeraj Malhotra. I am an academician and I am representing Lucknow Management Association. Well, really fascinated, I would say, repartee from all the group members. But as a parent, I believe that ice bucket challenge to real life challenge. I'm very sure all of you must have gone through the ice bucket challenge. And how do you think we as parents should be catering to the demands and the expectations of the new age, teenage, and of course the millennials? So I would expect answers from you on contributing to this. Thank you.
It's clearly that they've all acknowledged that I'm the oldest here. So I do, and you can get my age now. My older son's just turning 15.
Okay.
And he started an NGO last year to segregate waste in the city of Delhi, along with his younger brother who's 12. Now, that's the kind of stuff that is happening where, so he's not even millennial. I guess he's after 2000.
Gen Z.
Yes.
Gen Z,
okay.
yeah.
So he's Gen Z.
No, Z, as in Z, but the Americans say Z,
okay.
So now it's Gen Z.
Gen Z,
Right.
Okay. And as from a parenting perspective, I'm seeing how my parents dealt with us and how we are dealing with them has changed quite a lot. We have to change. We don't have an option. So we live with how much time we can give them on the screen. So how can we control the kind of time that they spend looking at the screen? And it's a losing battle. So apart from that, you have to still continuously work on some things that are common are building ethics, building a certain value system. That doesn't change at all. The education system has not worked, so hence they are not in the same education system that I was in. Let's say I did CBSE, these guys are doing an international board because we see that they are, it is much more friendly to creativity as well as more open-minded. So from a parenting perspective, you have to change with the times. And otherwise, we have this Gen Z that we're talking about and they are getting rebellious as well because the ways for them to show that rebellion is very obvious now.
True.
In the past, we would shut our door of our room and sit quietly. Nowadays, they will do a lot of other things like tweeting and
right.
Sharing their experiences with their parents online.
So this is the smart generation to deal with is we need to
On a
act
lighter
smart.
note, we're also referred to as the sandwich generation. We were the last generation to be scolded by our parents and the first generation to be scolded by our children.
Yes.
So we're sort of caught in the middle of that as well.
But Bindu, also, because we're talking about parenting and schools, what is the reaction to the music program that you run in schools? I mean, when you started out and now, are parents or even the teaching community becoming a little more receptive to why something like this in a more holistic development is required, and that, if you spend half an hour less on mathematics, it's not going to, kind of take away from your GMAT score or whatever?
So it's very interesting that the responses have sort of been different in different demographics. So when
demographics.
So when we work in underserved communities, for example, we work with 8,000 children across government schools and places. The first response that we would get back from the parents is, we've sent our children to school because we want them to be educated. We need them to learn mathematics. We need them to learn language. Music is not a skill that's going to help them earn money, which is a very, very valid argument if you look at it prima facie. But then these same parents started coming back to us after a few months saying, you know what, my child is calmer now. This brings my child a certain amount of happiness, and I see that she's able to speak up in class more. Or the principal or the teachers would come and say, okay, this has created a better sense of community. So even if we're not creating musicians, music is a powerful tool for underserved children, because it allows them the liberty of moving out of strict subjects and allowing them to engage creatively, because we don't know what jobs await them. Just learning your multiplication tables is not going to guarantee you a job. So in that demographic, this is the response we've seen. In more upwardly mobile schools, in your high-end CBSE schools or your IB schools, we see that a lot of parents want their children to experience everything. So in some senses, our generation missed out a lot on classical music and traditions. And so some of us sort of grew up feeling that we are not as rooted as our parents were, but we want that for our children, and we don't know how to re-access culture. We're obviously not trained well enough to read the Vedas, but we want to have some sort of connection to what Indian culture is. So music is a way to step back into that. And coming back to Global, we want to know more about, we want our children to learn about the music of Africa. We want our children to learn about this. And we're also more aware of the importance of inter and transdisciplinary studies. So I find that that demographic of schools has been much more open to the idea of the importance of music education, good quality music education, and not just a box that you have to tick off saying,
check off because it looks good when you're applying to a college in the USA.
Absolutely.
All right. Yes, so you had a question. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Rahul. And I run a HR company for the last 10 odd years. Coming back to the topic, which is transferring back power to millennials, I just wanted to share a couple of experiences. When we started hiring initially, we used to hire MBA graduates only, right? The kind of people that we brought in at that point of time required a larger learning curve, a lot of motivation from the management, and a lot of push to deliver. Last 2-3 years, we've been hiring graduates, and these are the guys who are pushing us to perform better because we need to grow at a pace to match theirs. So that is the real change that I see the millennials are bringing when it comes to work and to businesses. That they are pushing you to perform better so that you can grow with them. They outgrow you faster. So the problem that we are talking about, that these people are leaving jobs in 2 years, it is because they have outgrown their role in 2 years. We as a community, business community, we will probably have to re-engineer the kind of roles that we have for them, see how can we utilize their talent better because they're supremely talented. And yes, there is the flip side to it, which is the real divide in the country, that half of them are so talented and so focused and they know exactly what they want to do. And there is the second half of people who actually are clueless of what are they going to do in life. And that is probably because of gaps in education and training and guidance that is actually required at junior level for them. So this is just a thought that I wanted to share for the millennials, that it is not all good or all bad. There are brilliant sparks and there are brilliant opportunities that are there, and a lot of work that needs to be done on training, I think. Coming to Sir's point, he was talking about what parents need to do. I'm in HR, and we also hear points wherein candidates who have joined good companies tell their managers, sorry, my parents are not allowing me to do this. Parents need to let go of kids. They know what they want to do. And the way the businesses are working now has changed. and the parents have not. So they're still in the old rut, you know, why don't you give a bank PO exam, you know, get a government job. So parents need to let go of kids when they're pursuing something which they want to do.
You know, I think that parents' roles are evolving really fast in this. I'm not a parent, but it's parents are, so children are not like children, they're more like young adults now. You know, they're like these young adults, and they have a mind of their own, especially the millennials, and borrowing from a previous session where VK Bajaj, who runs today's Chanakya, he said that the first-time voter earlier used to vote as per his or her parents' decision, but now he says that this is my first vote, and I'm going to exercise this as per my wish to make a difference and to be heard and to make my voice heard. So the younger generation is, I think, very clear on what they want. It may not be good or bad. You know, we all make our own decisions. Our decisions can be good or bad decisions, but they are very sure of the decision they want to make.
He was making is reimagining this tiered system of moving up the ladder slowly. You know, first you will be associate manager, then assistant, then executive, and you know, or corporations keep throwing in these layers and layers and layers because perhaps they're not growing fast enough to absorb all of this talent. What is your own sense over there? You know, reimagining that piece altogether, and it's not just calling someone, you know, some fancy name like, I don't know, something ninja or something rock star, but you know, actually making material difference in the work they do for like 10 hours a day.
So absolutely, we love people who challenge us and who make us work harder and think harder and change the way we work. So those people now, I think, in the new age corporate setups are very welcome in most organizations. There are special roles for them. There are strategic positions for these kind of people in most organizations today. So there, I think we've done, as management, we've done a fairly decent job. Vineet here was saying about, you know, the leadership academy that they identify people and put them in leadership roles. So I think the corporates are trying to deal with this situation. On the other hand, there is also a little bit of mismatch, I would say, between how they are educated, especially in these MBA colleges, etc., and when they come to work, they find a rude shock because there is no connect between what they've been learning and what the expectation of management or of a corporate is. So there is where a major disconnect happens and requires a lot of training and bringing them to a place which will actually make them feel comfortable. So because it has to be about what their expectation is and what is reality. So that has to be bridged better, I would say, where things can change.
All right. Yes, sir, go ahead. Then.
Good afternoon. This is Kuldeep Kumar Sharma. I'm mentoring a startup, and I represent here North India section of Textile Institute, Manchester. It is my observation and could be an understanding to the panelists as well as to the audience over here. The digitization has given us very good blessings in terms of the speed, accuracy, and precision in terms of our actions. It has also given us a good analytics, but at the same time, we are not able to find the depth of knowledge or the dissemination of knowledge, the knowledge in real terms, we're not able to see. And this is generating an impulsive behavior among this generation, which I have observed in the startups, which all of you are managing those startups. So the big challenge is how to take care of it and emerge with the qualitative decision making in a perspective. Now, earlier session we were listening about Ajay Gupta. Some words of wisdom were there. He says the detached action, the message of Bhagavad Gita. Whereas we find in our generation with my kids, my eldest son is 36 years, it states. We find indulged actions. which create the problem. They are indulged in the actions. And we have heard with the experience, which is a very rich experience of detached action. So now the ultimate thing what I need to address, which can be gained over here, is the excellence in your assignment. Wherever you are, whatever you do, you must excel at that point of time in that assignment, and that is what should be the way of success defined for this generation, maybe millennial or anyone else for that matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Should we go to the next question? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Sorry for coming again, though. One person, one question. Vineet, my blessings for your son for the kind of work they are doing. But now I'm asking your question. You said millennial, American term, more attuned to now Indian conditions, global conditions, fine. Why are these millennials, when it comes to their role in the society, I mean, Delhi has 45,000 weddings in a day. They don't earn their own money to burn that money. The money is spent by the parents. Why don't they stop their parents, bring changes in the society, and then turn out to be an example? And girls also who get highly educated still expect the money to be coming from the parents. Why do the millennials do not think about this kind of a thing and bring about changes which can inspire the society? Millennials should answer us. Why this gain without pain in our society?
But you know, I think there has been a change. It's starting.
Where?
I can give you multiple examples.
30 years ago, मैंने ₹1,000 में शादी की थी. मुझे आज तक example नहीं मिलते.
No, I paid for my own wedding. My husband and I paid for our own wedding.
30 साल पहले मैंने भी ₹100 में किया था. लेकिन मैं कहता हूँ 45,000 में आज कितने example हैं?
I think काफी होंगे, sir. Like I have.
काफी होंगे. Millennials talk about data, talk about data.
So the point is, I don't think there is data on this issue as such, but I feel that there will be a faster change now. I wish to. I wish to.
I think that's a generalization, and one thing is for sure that millennials शादी ही late कर रहे हैं और कोई हैं जो करना ही नहीं चाह रहे, तो उससे वो save.
True that. A lot of life decisions are being postponed.
I wanna say that changes are there in the sense, I have attended a friend's wedding, which was a carbon zero footprint wedding. I'm not sure if I'm saying it the right way. Basically, it was in the hills and it was like environmentally friendly, and they did not have generators. You know, so maybe it's zero carbon footprint. Thank you. So those kind of initiatives are happening. I know friends who've donated their wedding gifts to NGOs and things like that.
Yeah. I think, you know, which we were discussing earlier, let's not forget that a huge number of people are living in villages in this millennial generation also. They don't have a choice. They're still, if you take a population in terms of percentage, it's still that whatever that ₹1.5 has become ₹100 or ₹500, that still is happening. So we have to remember that, let us look at the nation as a whole, and things are different. Look at subsections of society, things are different.
And honestly, I don't want the wedding market to go away. I just want it to become bigger, so that more home chefs can earn money making mithais and serving these weddings.
I think, sir, you can take this up with the AIMA folks who call the panel the Millennial Challenge. But yes, sir, in the front rows, you guys can go ahead.
Whatever Mr. Khurana has suggested, actually he is trying to bring a new concept. कि why there can't be a digital marriage kind of thing.
Sir, जब हो जाएगा उसमें भी लोगों को तकलीफ होगी, तो ऐसी कोई बात नहीं.
मुझे लगता है actually what Anubhav is saying is correct. There probably will be, you know, these institutions of marriage and stuff are little outdated, might not even exist few years from now.
So bots will get married to bots, right?
Go ahead, sir.
So I had a question for Mr. Vineet. So Mr. Vineet is running a logistics organization, and it is an example, I think, where you have a millennial running another organization, Rivigo.
I'm not a millennial.
That's what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is a non-millennial could get, upstarted by a millennial organization. So is your organization agile enough, nimble enough to probably copy, if not, come up with something which is completely disruptive? So you have the example of Rivigo, which is a hub-based transport logistics company where drivers work 9 to 5 kind of a thing, and they don't travel across the country. So do you have something, is your organization sort of aware or, is contemplating how do you challenge or deal with threats like this in the environment, which could come from somebody, who could be just a 24-year-old?
Yeah, so I think, disruption is different from whether you're a millennial or not a millennial. It does not apply. Personally, it could come from
because your organization is a very old organization. What I'm saying is TCI being,
that doesn't matter.
Correct.
I think you have 200-year organizations also existing.
Correct.
It's a question of how you're looking at things. If an organization like Rivigo, and I don't want to get quoted here, but an organization that's a startup is losing 30 paisa for every rupee that they earn, sure, why not? You can do that. Let's talk about this after 6 months if the organization still exists, whether they get funding or not. 60-year organizations like mine or ours has gone through lots of changes, and we've been nimble for every generation that comes about. Otherwise, we wouldn't have survived. So this is just one part of one generation. And then there's another generation that will happen in a few years, which happened a few years ago. Because when I joined the business 23 years ago, there was a different talk. You guys are so old, you guys will not survive. Today, 60 years, we've completed 60 years, there's a different talk that you guys will not survive. But I think clearly that's up to us, how nimble can we be. But secondly, I think we have to also remember you cannot just run with everyone's money and keep losing money and call yourself successful. I don't think in any definition that is success.
Okay. One more observation I had here is, like, if you see the India's sort of population history in the last 60 years, the initial generation's parents probably were government servants, and then the next generation were private sector parents. And so the next generation now wants to be entrepreneurs. So is that a transition, and has nothing to do with millennials, but more to do with financial security, the kind of change in the nature of the people and the kind of expectations. So, they're more risk-taking, if that is how a millennial can be classified vis-a-vis the generation, the baby boomers or the one prior.
I don't think so. I think India has always been a country of entrepreneurs. There's a great book worth reading by Mr. Gurcharan Singh, or rather Dr. Gurcharan Das, which is called Billions of Entrepreneurs. I think every person who ran a kirana ka dukaan, every mochi, every pan wala is an entrepreneur, right? And there are so many of them in India. That is our identity, I feel, as a country, and has always been. So it's not something which millennials are doing. I think these people have taken risks. Indians have taken a risk. Even from an immigration perspective, when we are going to different countries at an older generation where people didn't know English, didn't have any information, going to a new country, setting up work there. So I don't think millennials are necessarily more risk-taking. I think they are coming from a slightly more privileged position than some of our ancestors and forefathers did. So they have a different mindset, you can say, because there's not as much scarcity, there's not as much. But I don't agree necessarily that we are better risk takers.
To add to that, I would like to say that we must not forget that the parents of these millennials have the highest life expectancy ever, as per Indian life expectancy standards. So that also gives you that added protection and that added privilege of having your parents around for a longer time as compared to the previous generations.
All right. Any more? Yes. We'll just take, I think, 2 more questions and then we'll wind up. Yes, sir, we'll just come to you.
So, I'm Praveen Dwivedi, coming from Lucknow. I represent an organization called Evoke India Foundation, which is into financial literacy and financial inclusion. My question is to Bindu, in fact. For music, as a subject, we all have been taught music in the schools. Everybody had in the syllabus music as one subject. Now for the current millennials and Gen Z, how are they're changing in terms of what instrument they want to play. Someday they will like to play guitar, someday they will like to play drum. You know, all that is something which is quite erratic behavior in them. While they love music, no, is it a fad? While I have no disconnect in terms of the importance of music for education, you know, everything is related to music, and if you have that, your behavior changes and your study level goes up. So my question is that at the policy level, you are working with a lot of schools also. What do you want to suggest to the government, you know, that what changes they should bring in the education system or pattern where the music can really help, or the curriculum can really help integrate it so well that it actually gets some good results and outcome in the skill set. Thank you.
Thank you for that well thought out question. I know a lot of us had music in schools when we were growing up or had private music tuition, but I think by and large what happened was it was so heavily music teacher dependent that every one of us had a different experience. And the issue, I would say 10 or 15 years ago, was that beyond having music as a subject, every teacher was able to develop his or her own curriculum, and the turnover rate of teachers was so high that every time your music teacher would leave, your entire music curriculum would change. What we're looking at is creating a system where we can create a broad enough base so that children can learn enough about different types of music that if they choose to take it further in a particular direction, they can. But even if they don't, they get access to enough styles of music and enough concepts around music that they can apply to everyday life. For example, when we teach African music, it's not just about teaching music with beats and having fun and songs, but there's also an underlying current of tolerance, of how we should appreciate that there are people who look different than us, and we may have been making fun of them for centuries and whatever, but we should realize that we're all the same. When we teach the music of Europe, we use that to start a deeper dialogue on the issue of migration and what it feels like to leave your home. And so there are a lot of undercurrents that are running through the everyday lives of children. We have to accept that children now are much more aware of terrible things that are happening in the world than we were. And we sort of use music as a tool to help them understand and navigate and overall be able to connect music to other subjects, but also understand what it means to be a 21st century human.
All right, thank you. Just that last question and we'll wind up. Yes, sir, go ahead.
This is Ramji from Coimbatore Management Association. My daughter she's in her 20s, and she's always against examinations, right from her, she stood first in the school and all that. And for her age, you know, she has been trying out various things, and also she is into value education workshops and all. She is able to handle children from age 3 to 18. Now, those are her skills. Only thing is, why is this shifting of focus taking place in these children? But they do a lot of things. They do handle children. They do learn. She's also doing her MSc psychology. But I find there's a lot of people, they just shift from one thing to the other depending on the environment, on the this thing. What is it? What is that which is missing in what others had, or which is driving them to take up new things?
Okay, I would hazard it's perhaps this access to information and access to what the possibilities are, which opens up your own mind to what all you can do. You know, 10 years back, perhaps you didn't know that a career as a home chef was possible. Now you know, so you think that, hey, should I try this out? I mean, that's my own 2 bits, but you guys please come in with what you think. And this will also be a sort of concluding notes to this conversation, right? A parent trying to understand why my child is a rolling stone.
So you're absolutely right. We see this, a lot of people want to quit their jobs to become home chefs because they've always been interested in food, cooking. They think they're great at it, but they never got an opportunity. They would not fit in potentially in a commercial kitchen, say at Taj, because they don't have that type of training, right? So this, the availability of different opportunities is immensely more than it has ever been. And we see that this changes your mind so often than not that you are happy to explore, especially if you have no other constraint, which your daughter probably doesn't.
Spirituality is a big theme. I agree on that. You guys want to go ahead, Vineet? And Bindu and Anubhav, just closing comments.
Spirituality, yes, it's a emotional, intelligent quotient, emotional quotient, and now spiritual quotient is a critical factor, I think, and I think even the learning is moving towards that. I was very surprised when my kids in the first few years of school, they were started doing yoga and meditation already. So yes, even schools are realizing the importance of that, and at homes also, how much we can build that, whether you call it mindfulness or whether you call it some kind of a process where spirituality is not just in your heart and mind, but also what you do. So giving, how can you be more giving? And I think homes and parents can only build that more and more. So absolutely right, it's very critical.
I agree. Spirituality is a very important part of everyone's life and should be put more into practice, whether it's mindfulness or however else we choose to term it. And also we should be aware that as a generation, and I think the generations to come are looking at being multidimensional. We don't just want to be identified as one thing. And I think that reflects in everything we do, whether it's the fact that we're lifelong learners or the fact that we jump to different careers or the fact that we want to do multiple things at the same time. So I think it's just the fact that we have the luxury of being multidimensional, the fact that we have the luxury of experimenting and trying to do different things and then trying to see how we can tie all those things together to create our own personal identities.
And also that we have access to so much more. Access to people, access to information, and just general access and connectivity is there in a much bigger way. It is not just about knowing your neighbor anymore, it's about knowing people across the world, and you have easy access to them. And yes, spirituality and giving back are very important, and we experience that in our own humble way at Salam Balak Trust, where our children who are essentially street and working children who are rehabilitated and they get jobs, and from their first jobs, they want to, from their first salary paychecks, they want to donate like everything to us, which is very humbling, and we're like, no, we cannot take that because you need this to make yourselves grow. So yeah, I would like to just end with that.
All right, on that note, we're going to conclude. Thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate the engagement. Thank you very much.
Thank you for making it a very interactive and interesting session for us. As you can see, we now have the poll results for the question which we shared before the session. May I request Ms. Rekha Sethi, Director General AIMA, to please join us on stage to kindly present mementos to the panelists and the moderator. Our thanks to Ms. Syna Dehnugara. Thank you. Our thanks to Mr. Vedant Kanoi. We'd like to thank Mr. Vineet Agarwal. Our thanks to Ms. Bindu Subramaniam. Our sincere thanks to Mr. Anubhav Nath. Thank you, Ms. Sethi, for joining us on stage to present the mementos. Ladies and gentlemen, with this, we have come to the end of AIMA's 5th National Leadership Conclave. Thank you all for joining us here today and staying with us the entire day. We would also like to thank our sponsors who have supported us at this conclave and made it possible for us to organize it at this large scale. Our sincere thanks once again to Ambuja Neotia Group, RP Sanjeev Goenka Group,